Hello, my name is John Capobianco, and today we're going to be looking at React agents for NetBox. So what these are autonomous agents that can reason and act more or less with just a little bit of Python to interact with using a natural language system, NetBox. Now, NetBox is an extremely popular source of record. You may have heard it referred to as a source of truth. It is actually on par with things like Python and Ansible in the world of network automation, and it's becoming table stakes. Most organizations, I feel, if they aren't already using a NetBox, will be soon, or a Autobot, something similar. So what I wanted to do was use the REST API system, which is incredible for NetBox. It's very well documented. It has a Swagger UI, and it's very uniform and easy to use, and create some tools in Python, how to create a record, read a record, find the URL, delete a record, and give those tools to the LLM so that when I prompt it, how many circuits do I have, it will invoke the tool to look up the correct API to get the circuits. It will then actually make an API call to get that data, and then it will interpret the JavaScript object notation, JSON payload back in natural language. Now, I've done some pretty neat things, and there's some emergent behavior here where we can ask about circuits, we can ask about all kinds of different things. I've even successfully posted and created a record. Let's try to do some of this together. Now, before we proceed, I have two versions in the same Git repository, meaning I have a main branch, and the main branch is focused on ChatGPT. So you need an API key from ChatGPT in order to use this tool. Now that might not appeal to people because it's public and they might not want their NetBox data going out to a public provider of artificial intelligence. So I've made an Ollama branch that you can just, when you clone the repository, you can change into the Ollama branch and build your container from there. And that will run Llama 3.2 locally and privately. Now, to be transparent, I haven't had much success with the Llama 2 implementation. It really does work better with a paid GPT 4.0 account. That aside, let's take a look at the technology. So here I am in the demo NetBox dev environment. This is a dev environment from the NetBox community that is pre-populated with all kinds of stuff, and people are populating with their own sandbox use cases and demo use cases. It is reset nightly at 4 UTC, so nothing is persistent in here. And I'm using it mainly for the API system and to build a front end for this. Now, this is the traditional way. We click around and we click and we click and we click. Can we instead use natural language as the front end for this system? So the first thing we're going to need is an API key. We can do it under the admin API tokens here, or even up here in the admin panel API tokens. So let's add a token with write enabled so we can actually create things. And we're going to create that. So we'll keep this handy. And now let's take a look at the code. So this is a Docker container. We're not going to focus on the Docker components, but there is very few things to pip install. We need Streamlit, LangChain Community, and OpenAI. In the Ollama instance, we don't need OpenAI, we need Ollama, but we'll look at that a little later. So first of all, I have this JSON file that has the URL and a friendly name for all of the APIs in NetBox, or most of them. There may be some others that are new that I haven't added, but for the most part, it's all of the API coverage. In the React agent, we are importing a few things here. Mainly, we need the chat model from Chat OpenAI. We need the agent code for an agent executor and a create React agent. And we're also going to be bringing in some prompts for a prompt template and some core tools to render the text description and importing tools. I have a couple global variables to initialize the LLM and agent executor as none. I have my NetBox controller class, which has the get API, the post API, and the delete API All right, so the CRUD activities. I could add a put as well. I probably should add a put for updating records. And then what we're going to do later on is I'm also loading the URLs. So a little function to load the URLs and a little function to check the URL support. Here we can see I'm decorating the tools that I'm going to pass along to the LLM. So discover APIs, right, on how to actually discover the correct API. Check the supported URL, make sure that we're getting the right URL from the list based on the prompt. Get the NetBox data, create NetBox data, and delete NetBox data. And then a little function to process the response, so we're getting it back in the correct, conversational structure. The rest is part of the Streamline application, a configuration page where the user puts in their NetBox URL, NetBox API token, and their Open API key. There's no Open API key needed for the Ollama instance. Finally, we're going to actually initialize our agents with this amazing template. So first of all, we list our tools, all of the tools that we have, and the tool descriptions. Next, we need this amazing template, and it's really human text describing the tools, giving it some guidelines, and giving it the format. So the thought, the action input, the observation, and the final answer to the user. And then we give it a scratch pad so it can work things out on its own. We're going to set up a prompt template, bringing in the template above, the input variables, and some partial variables. Create the React agent, and then create an agent executor. Finally, down here is basically the chat interface, where when the user sends the button, we're going to invoke that agent executor. All right, with the user's input, the history, so we have conversational history, and the scratch pad, we're going to initialize that as an empty string when we invoke that agent executor. The rest is just printing out stuff to the screen for the conversation. So let's turn this on. Right, Docker compose up. And the first time you run, okay, so this is not the Ollama version. I'll show you a difference with the Ollama version in a minute. But what we can do is visit that localhost 8501. And here we can put in our API tokens and the URL for the demo dev box. Right, so this URL with the token I just created and my OpenAI key. And now we can start to ask it questions. So let's ask it something factual, right? How many circuits do I have? And we're going to send that. Now we're going to look at the logs here, and it's going to do some posting against the ChatGPT API. The agent is working things out here, and then we should see it actually invoke our agent tools to get this answer. Now, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's a lot less complex than, say, a RAG implementation where we need embeddings and a vector store and a retrieval model. We're just going to let this run here. Or has it already answered? 404 not found. All right, so 404 not found. Let's try this again. It's not perfect. Let's just try it again. There we go. Okay, so this is better. Much, much better. So let's scroll up to the top and see the reasoning here. So to determine how many circuits are present, I need to fetch the circuit data from NetBox. I should first check if the API for circuits is supported and then retrieve the data. So it is supported, and the closest API is the circuits API. So the API for circuits is supported and the closest API is this. I will now use this to fetch the data and determine the number of circuits. We got a 404 here, which is okay because then it tried it again. So that's that 404 that we had. And this time we actually see it call the correct circuit. So there's 29 circuits And that's what it should say in our UI. And here's all that JSON data. So now back here, right, you have 29 circuits in your NetBox system. Now earlier when I was playing with the NetBox, if we go to providers, organization, where is this? Circuits, providers. There's one here called Bell Canada that I created. So let's try to do this from, and we're going to delete this. Let's try to recreate this. So now to add a provider, what we need is a slug is a required field and a name. And let's actually associate it with an AS number this time. So AS65001. All right, so let's try this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our conversational UI and say, let's try this. Yeah, so I am the administrator. Actually, we don't need to do that. Please create a provider called Bell Canada with a slug of Bell and an ASN of 6501. Send. So let's see what happens here. It's going to iterate a little bit. Let's try to do a split screen so we can see what happens on the screen here. Okay, so it's hit the agents. It looks like it tried to post it. Okay, so it said it was a permissions issue. I don't think it is a permissions issue. Let's try it again. Again, it's not an exact science. I was able to create one. Now, the ASN is new. I didn't try to add an ASN the first time. I just had it with the name and the slug when it did work for me. But what's neat is you can see it trying to iterate a couple of times here with different payloads. Actually, so this one worked. So now, right, the provider Bell Canada has been successfully created with an ASN of 65001. You can view it here. Let's try here. There's Bell Canada. And I thought it would have an ASN. Huh. I thought it would have an ASN here. Object Bell Canada. No, it doesn't have any ASNs. Providers. Okay, well, anyway, it did create the provider. I'm not sure why it didn't create the ASN. So let's see if we can delete this provider now. And I've sort of lost my way here. Let's go back to providers. Okay, so let's see if we can delete Bell Canada through the conversational UI here. Could you please delete the Bell Canada provider? And I'll have to work on the conversational history. I see that I don't have a conversational history here. .404. Okay, so it deleted it, although it did say I got a 404. So one of my actions here, one of these requests did actually delete the I thought I would get a status code back or something, but it did delete the provider. So that's quite interesting. Let's see if, let's try to find, let's go back to the home menu. So there's 6 VRFs. That's a nice number of VRFs to look at. Let's see. Can you please create a table of my VRF information? See if we can get a tabular data out of this. And I will have to patch in the conversational history. So that worked pretty well. Gets seem to work very well. Right? To create a table of VRF information, I need to fetch the VRF data. There's our VRF table. And if we quickly look over here, yeah, it's pretty close. It's bang on, right? Very cool. So how about something like, what can you tell me about VRF shared? Now, hopefully it'll be able to make a request directly against that URL. Well, that was weird. Yeah. There we go. And if these hyperlinks should take us right to the route targets. Right, so very specific information is good. If you know what the VRF or what the circuit ID is. What can you tell me about circuit ID 9? So see, it does add circuit/9. So we should be getting the API directly from that circuit now. And then what I'll do is I'll quickly flip it over and show you what the free Ollama implementation looks like, and just show you for the sake of showing you how to use it or how to get into it. Let's just let this finish up here. It's strange. It's non-deterministic, that's for sure. The agents are a little bit wild west right now, for sure. This is only a few hours old. But the last time I tried this, what can you tell me about circuit ID 9? It came back. Okay, so it has the information here. And there's all the circuit information, but it's not being printed out to my screen. Very strange behavior. Let's try this again. Needs a little polish, it needs a little work. All the information is here about the circuit. I'm not sure why it didn't make it out to my Streamlit app. There we go. There we go. So there's our circuit ID 9, the SID, the provider, the type, it's MPLS, tenant, termination. We have all the hyperlinks in here. Just a wonderful front end for NetBox with natural language. So let me bring the Docker container down. All right, so let me just flush out these Docker containers here, ReAct Agent. And I'm going to show you something. So if you've cloned this repository, the main branch is going to be the paid ChatGPT. If you switch to Ollama, the Ollama branch, you're going to see a couple of new files and folders, and the Docker Compose is quite a bit different. The only difference in terms of the code is that I'm importing Ollama from the community LLMs. And if we search for LLM equals, I'm using Ollama instead of ChatGPT, and I'm pointing to Llama 3.2. Now, the very first time you run this, make sure you give the Ollama container time to download Llama 3.2, but every subsequent time you run it, it's going to be cached. So now let's go Docker Compose up. And you're going to see here the Ollama server. So it is going to pull the manifest here. So this is the first time I've run this fresh container. So we have to just wait until this finishes pulling the manifest and you see that the Ollama server is running. This is only going to take a minute or two. I'm going to fast forward the video to then. The manifest is just finishing up. It's about 2 gigs for this 3 billion parameter Llama 3.2. And then we're going to see that everything's ready and listening. So now we can actually visit our localhost 8501. And you're going to see here now that we just need the NetBox URL. And feel free to use their demo box to play with this tool instead of your own data if you want to get playing with it. So let me just grab a token here. And now we can continue on with the chats. So let's ask it how many circuits do I have, and I'll show you the potential differences. So you can see that locally in my GPU through Ollama, right, it's loading this up and trying to do the inference locally, right? So you'll see that it's posting locally to API generate instead of the cloud. And we're just going to have to hang out. So right, see, so I sort of got an error here. Let's try it again. We'll see if we can force this to answer us. And I don't think, okay, so see, it's just not as good as it's trying. You can see the agent is definitely trying some stuff here. But it's more or less a hallucination. Now, maybe a larger billion parameter model, a large language model instead of the small language model might work better. However, I haven't had a great success with Llama 3.2 yet. So this one stopped due an iteration limit or time limit. So we can try it one more time here and see if we get any better results. So it is trying. But it tried, yeah, see, strange. So really, this leaves me wondering what you are going to ask your NetBox, what kind of conversations you're going to have, what kind of CRUD activities you're going to perform. The sandbox, feel free to use it. You can clone my repo, spin up the container, and use it with the NetBox API system that's in the cloud just to play with this and just to explore it. Please share any cool stuff that you get out of the tool. That would be really, cool for me to see your results. And again, give me some feedback. What do you want me to ask of the NetBox? And let's see if this agent system can do the job. All right, I'll be back with more.